You asked for it, we're doing it. Comma.ai and a Gen 1 Rivian on the Mountain Loop Autonomy test. Let's go. If you haven't heard of comma.ai before, it's actually super cool. It's a little device that can sit in the windshield of your vehicle and plug into your car's wiring, and it gives you advanced ADAS with lane centering, and it's super cool. So I'll kind of walk you through how all of the comma stuff works, what comma is, and some of the specific limitations to the Rivian version and how it comes into play with this Mountain Loop test, because there definitely is some nuance there. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Mike, you're watching Thunderbolt Auto, and in this one, we're testing comma.ai in the Mountain Loop test. If exploring tech and EVs is your jam, you're at the right place. That's my jam too. Hit subscribe for more videos like this where we'll be testing autonomy, EVs, and a lot of R2 content coming before too long here. So first, what is the goal of comma? On their website, they say right out front, it's meant to make driving chill. It's interesting because it has a lot of crossover with systems like, Rivian's Universal Hands-Free and Tesla Autopilot. And, it's meant to be a driver assistance system to really just take the workload off of your day-to-day commute. What it's not meant to be is a full autonomous driving system. And it's simply not capable of that as it stands right now. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. And this really comes down to just an interesting underlying technology difference between Rivian's Universal Hands-Free and comma. At this point, they're functionally very similar. They have a very similar feature set. They do a lot of the same things and they perform very close to each other. But Rivian's Universal Hands-Free isn't meant to be a driver assistance system and that's it. It's meant to be a fully autonomous system. And the software hasn't gotten there yet, but that's kind of what Rivian's shooting for. Comma, on the other hand, outwardly it's not necessarily shooting to be a full autonomous system. As it stands right now, it doesn't really have full awareness of everything that's happening around the vehicle in 360 degrees. It basically can see, out the front of the vehicle with the cameras there. It has a driver facing camera so that it can see you. And it may be able to see if the blind spot monitor on your vehicle is triggered to see, if there's a vehicle in the way of a lane change or not. But it doesn't really have precise positioning of any vehicles that are outside of you. It's really only tracking, maybe 1 to 2 vehicles that are directly in front of you. And that's all it has. And honestly, that's all you need for good, just driver assistance to take the workload off of your daily commute. You don't need anything more than that. And that's why it gets away with just being a little device that doesn't even have anything more than a smartphone processor in it. Rivian, on the other hand, is accomplishing essentially the same level of driver assistance with a big array of sensors 360 degrees around the vehicle. And at all times, it has an awareness of all of the vehicles in, the 2 lanes next to you in every direction. It has a very good situational awareness of everything that's going on. So, even though they're very functionally similar right now, they're built in fundamentally different ways. And that means that Rivian has the headroom to become a more autonomous system in the future. All that said, comma could potentially become a more autonomy-based system rather than an assistance-based system in the future. There's been a lot of talk about adding extra computational horsepower using, external GPUs, things like that. One thing that could make it really work very well is if it's able to tap into the cameras that are already on the vehicle. Because in the case of Rivian and Tesla, these vehicles already have cameras with 360 degree vision. So if the comma is able to tap into those camera feeds, then sure, yeah, it might be able to become a more autonomous system. But just worth highlighting the fundamental differences of how these systems are put together and what their goals are. Before we get straight into the road test, I do want to give a little bit of a technical background on the specific comma setup that we have, but it does get kind of into the weeds. So if you'd rather just skip to the road test, you're more than welcome to use the chapter markers to skip ahead. So for this test, the software that we're going to be running on our comma is called Adventure Pilot. This is a branch of software for the comma that is specifically tuned for Rivian. And this is nice because it unlocks a little bit more steering capability for the Rivian. And this is kind of where we reach a crossroads for capability of what comma on Rivian has. There's actually a couple of different ways that you can connect the comma to the vehicle's wiring. There's a wiring harness that you can get straight from comma AI. That's the first party solution. And unfortunately, it's just not the greatest solution, even though it's the first party stock solution. It's essentially only capable of controlling steering. It doesn't have access to the vehicle's blind spot monitoring. It can't control the longitudinal, which is your acceleration and braking. It's just lateral or steering, which is really a shame because that's the experience that you get stock from comma. That said, there is another solution that is community driven, and it's actually really cool, that gives it a whole bunch more capability. We have one of these harnesses on pre-order, and they're supposed to start shipping sometime very near future. So we will be putting this new wiring harness to the test, but for now we have the stock one, and we'll be putting that one to the test because that is that out of the box comma experience. The main attraction of this new harness is that it adds the capability for a new kind of steering control called angle steering. With the normal one, basically the way that it works is the comma requests a certain amount of steering torque from the Rivian. So it just says, hey, pull this hard on the steering wheel, and then eventually the wheel just kind of turns to where you want, and you pull a little harder if you want it to go a little bit farther. It's a little bit of a clunky control system, but it works, and a lot of vehicles on the road actually use this internally. But this new harness uses what's called angle-based steering, where instead of saying, hey, pull this hard on the steering wheel, you just say, hey, point the steering wheel in this direction. You can precisely control exactly what position you want the steering wheel to be in. And this actually really helps because there is an inherent torque limit when you're using the old solution, the stock solution. And this actually came into play on the mountain loop test a little bit, where when you're going at speed and you're taking tight corners, eventually there comes a point when the comma is not allowed to pull any harder on the steering wheel for safety purposes. And so it's not necessarily able to make all the corners very cleanly. But this angle-based steering solves a lot of these problems. The other great thing that this wiring harness will do is it will allow the comma itself to control the speed and actually do the acceleration and braking. With the stock harness that we'll be using in this test today, you just have to use the built-in Rivian cruise control, which is fine in a lot of scenarios. It's meant to be used on the highway. So when you use it off highway, it can get a little bit weird and not the greatest. So having comma control it will definitely be a big help. So I'm excited to see how this performs. There is one huge asterisk though, and this new wiring harness is $500 just for the wiring harness. So it's not cheap. It's a pretty complicated piece of tech to be able to interface with the Rivian system in this way. So there's a little bit of a background on what the landscape is for comma in Rivian and what our particular setup is. Now it's time to get into the actual road test, and I just wanted to give a quick background on the score. If you haven't seen a mountain loop autonomy test before, it's basically like a golf score, where lower is better and 0 is a perfect score. The score has two components. It has the incident report that's basically just did it do it or did it not do it? And then there's the vibe check that's more of the subjective feel score, just kind of how it felt to me using the system. So without further ado, let's get into the road test. Also, I wanted to give a quick thanks to Vion for sponsoring this video. It's starting to get hot here in Utah in the summer, and these sunshades are incredible for controlling the heat in the cabin. Like, it's shocking the difference that they make. And they actually just came out with a new light set that fits the Ocean Coast interior on the R1. It's absolutely incredible. If you're interested in checking them out, you can use my discount code TVOLT to save 10%. Editor Mike here with one quick thing that I forgot to mention. Comma has this feature that's called MADS, where you can basically control the gas and the braking yourself, but then it controls the steering. But for the purposes of this test, I'm not going to count anything that is using MADS as engagement, because ultimately, if you're controlling the gas and the braking, you're still involved with the driving process. It's not an autonomous thing, and this is meant to be an autonomy test. So while it does have the capability to run in this MADS mode, we won't be using it for the mountain loop. Okay. Here we go. We are off on the comma test. So one unfortunate thing about this loop that may be a detriment is I don't think that we can get it to engage on this road, because the reality is comma will engage on any road at any time. However, the problem is you have to enable cruise control for it to enable. And I don't think that we'll be able to get cruise on this, because you have to be going 20 miles an hour for the Rivian cruise to kick in. Yeah, that's just not feasible on this road, unfortunately. So yeah, we'll I guess there's the first point right there, is that it can engage on this road, which is not something that you would expect for comma, which will engage anywhere. But since the comma is not controlling the speed, the acceleration, and the braking, we're reliant on cruise control. And also right here, we're going below 20, so it won't engage here. I do expect that to be a drastically different situation once we've got the new harness that's supposed to be coming, sometime later this year, that will allow for angle steering and longitudinal control and all that stuff. But as of right now, we unfortunately are relying on just the stock cruise. Okay, but on this next road, we can go 20 miles an hour, so I should be able to engage just fine. And we are engaged and off. This truck here has a nice loud exhaust going on. Oh, were they wanting to get over? Well, should have gotten in that lane before. Disengaging to turn right at this light here. Because it will not reliably do corners, and it certainly won't do it on cruise control. So no points for that. But re-engaging here on this road. Speed control, Rivian changed on Gen 2 to use the scroll wheel for speed control, which is so much nicer and easier and better. Ooh, I am going to disengage there. That was uncomfortable. The stock Rivian cruise control is just not capable of seeing vehicles that far away and slowing down for a traffic light. So that was a disengagement there. I suspect that if comma was controlling the speed, it would have done a better job with that, but yikes. But we're re-engaged now, and we're getting onto the freeway. So changing our speed here for this on-ramp. And I'm gonna have to give some corrective input there, because at that speed it didn't have enough torque on the steering wheel to be able to keep turning. That's the thing is with the steering wheel torque, is it's limited with how hard it can pull on the steering wheel, and the faster you go, the bit more stress that puts on there. So we definitely felt that. We're just cruising along nicely here. This is where comma really does well, is on highway cruising. It does a fantastic job, just drama-free. That's kind of its jam. Just like universal hands-free, this is its jam. This is where it does really, really well. And I would say it fits the slogan of make driving chill. This feels very chill indeed. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and turn on the turn signal and get over here. Nice thing with this is, even though the comma isn't necessarily directly controlling the turn signal, the turn signal does automatically cancel when you get into the new lane, just by nature of the built-in Rivian system that's still active. Okay, speed limit change here as I'm getting off the highway. Okay. And I'm gonna have to disengage here to slow down. Another weakness of the built-in cruise control. One thing that I have noticed with this is on Gen 2, with both cruise and with universal hands-free, if you're going fast and you change the speed down, it's pretty quick about slowing down to match the speed that you set. On the Gen 1 cruise control, it appears that it just kind of naturally lets itself coast down to the speed that you're setting. So if you're going at dramatically slower, if you set it to a dramatically lower speed than you're already going, rather than slowing down to that speed, it sort of just naturally lets itself coast down, which usually takes too long. But re-engaged here. Okay, and we're coming up to the first corner here to go up the mountain. Okay, disengaging to follow the route. And the steering is definitely trying to help here. It doesn't really necessarily count for full autonomy because it's not controlling speed at that point, but it is nice that the steering does like stay active. Ooh, that was a little close to the edge of that lane for my comfort. Okay, and we're going to do a lane change again to follow the route here. And whether the lane change happens automatically or manually, it does count for the same in this test, because if you're doing something, you're doing something. Okay, and there was a speed limit change as well. So I'm hitting that. And at this point, I'm actually going to make a discretionary lane change over to the right here, just because I'm probably going to be going a little bit slower than typical traffic. I usually don't like to go, 10, 15 over on these tests, because that's a little excessive. Oh, interesting. We crossed that line there. We did not stay centered in the lane. It wasn't really an issue because it was just the shoulder lane, but we did cross the line there. And the built-in Rivian system actually caught it. Oh, okay, audible control. It said that it ran out of steering torque there, but there was an audible warning. Didn't have to take over, but it did give me an audible warning for lack of steering torque. And we crossed over the line there. Oof, yeah, it seems to be struggling a little bit with having enough torque on the steering wheel at these speeds. Here's a tighter curve here, so let's see if it runs out of steering torque. We got pretty close to the limit, but we were okay. It actually almost oversteered a little bit. We didn't quite cross the line, but we came real close to it. And we crossed the line there again. Yeah, we've crossed that outside line quite a few times. And, oh, yeah, we ran out of steering torque there, so I had to give corrective action there. Okay, we're back within torque limits, barely, but we're back within torque limits. And, yeah, we crossed the line here, too. Oof, it's crossing that line quite a few times. Okay, we're going to change lanes into the left lane now so that we can stop. And that I am just going to count as disengagement for traffic control rather than just a general disengagement. I should have changed lanes a little bit sooner there. But you were seeing in action a limitation of the Rivian cruise control, again, with lane changes where it can't necessarily slow down to go behind the other person. But regardless, points wise, it actually doesn't matter in the slightest, because if I had to manually cue the lane change, that's what those points count for anyway. Well, I may do a discretionary lane change into the other lane as well, but we'll see if we hit the same steering torque limitations on the way down. I suspect we might, because people go rather quick, and we're crossing the line there again. We crossed over that line. And no corrective action there because it chose to get in the wrong lane. It tried to get in that turn lane there, so I had to give some corrective action there as well. And ironically, even though universal hands-free, we have a roadblock mid-July. Whoa, hold on. Okay, so just a quick little explanation of what happened there. Much to my surprise, the road was closed coming down off of the mountain. The nice thing is, the section of road that was closed was actually not very long. It was maybe like 100 feet worth of road that was closed. And the great part about that is that section was also just a straight piece of road with nothing that ever happens. And all the several runs of the mountain loop test that I've done before, never has anything ever happened on that section. So we got pretty lucky there. So I just went around it on the detour, got back onto the original road, and continued from there as if nothing had happened. And we are off on our regularly scheduled route again. Nice thing about this is that section that is closed is relatively small, and there's actually not anything that really gets points scoring in there. All of these turnoffs are the real test. So we're just going to cruise on through here, and it seems to be handling these turnoffs flawlessly, not even a little bit confused. So that's nice. We'll see how it does at the last turnoff down here, because we just crossed that outside line there. Again, onto the shoulder, not an issue typically, but it did cross the line. So but this last turnoff coming up right here is really the one that confused universal hands-free on the last run. It's been doing better and better, but this one still confused it. Comma just cruised right through. Okay, well, I will consider that a win for sure. All right, so we're going to disengage to follow the route in just a moment here so we can get onto the commuter lane. Okay. And we're getting lucky with this traffic merge here. And I think it'll actually get handled nice and cleanly. Okay, slowing down for this tunnel. This tunnel is notoriously difficult because of the tight turns and extreme lighting changes. Handling it nicely. I could tell that the stock cruise control lost track of that truck for a second. We started to speed up, which I would have had to take over for, but it figured out where the truck was again pretty quick, so it wasn't an issue. I didn't have to take over, but I could see that that was happening. So we're going to go ahead and disengage to go around this corner here to the home stretch. Yeah, I got to say, just based on all of the times that we crossed a lane line or hit a torque limit, I was really hoping for more out of comma, which is unfortunate. But you know, it's hard because comma is quite a capable device, but you really need to give it like the right environment to thrive, and the stock harness that just comes with it is not that environment. So we'll see with the other one how it does. I'm hoping for a lot better. But coming up to this last traffic light here, the longitudinal control doing all right here. Even though this is not what it was made for, it's doing all right. Okay, disengaging to follow the route. Okay, and then once again, I'm not going to be able to engage on this road just because I can't get up to that that 20 mile an hour requirement. The steering is active and helping out. Oh, nope, needs some more help there. I wasn't able to complete that one. But it is active and doing things, but at this point, I'm controlling the longitudinal control. I'm doing the acceleration and braking, so it's just, unfortunately, not autonomous. So, pulling off here, and that is our mountain loop test, folks. So there it was. There was the road test for comma AI, and honestly, I was a little bit disappointed. I was hoping that it would perform a little better. I was not counting on it hitting torque limits so often. So a quick little note on that. You may have noticed that there were quite a few times it actually crossed the line, either because it ran out of torque and couldn't pull on the steering wheel hard enough, or conversely, there were actually a couple times when it like pulled too hard and it oversteered and it hit the inside of the curve. And each of those times I did count it as a nudge. I didn't necessarily actually correct it each time, but it did cross, and so the system did get penalized for that. One interesting thing about this overturning issue is there's a whole bunch of different AI models that you can choose from to run on Adventure Pilot. There's a very long list. During my time with the comma, I actually experimented with two different AI driving models. The first one was OPM 10v3, and that's what I actually ran through the Mountain Loop test that you just watched. And that is the most recent release of any model that was available when I recorded on June 13th. I also played around with the most recent model that was in the releases category. I think that was CD210, and both exhibited this behavior of overturning. But it is worth noting that the model can heavily affect this behavior. So I'll be very interested to see how this is handled with future model revisions and with the new harness once we're able to get our hands on that. Oh, also, two things. If you're interested in seeing the full uncut version of this video, you can join the YouTube membership down below for 99 cents a month. That helps support the channel. Also, if you're interested in checking out the swag, I have t-shirts and stickers, both just general Thunderbolt Auto as well as Mountain Loop specific ones at shop.tvoltauto.com. So let's talk about the score then. On the incident report, it got a score of 35, which was, not the worst, but not as good as I was expecting. And really what it came down to is just crossing the lines so many times. We got 8 nudges for it crossing the lines. Other than that, it performed fairly similarly to universal hands-free as far as disengaging for intersections to take turns, speed adjustments, things like that. The speed adjustments are actually something that can go away with that longitudinal control. I really think that this score will get a lot better when we get the new wiring harness that is able to control the speed, the longitudinal, as well as the steering. So stay tuned for that one. And then on the vibe check, it kind of suffered on the vibe check as well. It got a score of 15. It did not feel super confidence inspiring because of all the times that it crossed the lines. Braking and acceleration was controlled actually not by comma, but by the stock Rivian system. And it does okay. It wasn't scary or anything, but it's, definitely not meant for this. And again, I think this is something that will improve once we get that new harness. So very interested to see that. It got a total score of 50, which for reference on Rivian's Universal Hands-Free, the previous software release got a total score of 65. And the most recent software release got a score of 38. So this run of the Mountain Loop test with comma put it squarely in between those two. It's definitely in the same league as Rivian's Universal Hands-Free. And I expect that we're going to see both systems have a pretty big level up here in the next few months because Rivian is about to release their Universal Hands-Free Phase 2. They've said that it's coming in Q3, and that will include a whole lot more autonomy on the freeway as far as automatic lane changes. It will stop for stoplights and stop signs all by itself. And so I think we're going to see the score get quite a bit better for Universal Hands-Free. But we're also going to be getting this new wiring harness for the comma probably within the relative same time frame, sometime within Q3. And so we'll definitely be testing both of these systems to see how they perform, because I think they're both going to be advancing very quickly here, and I'm excited to watch it. And you can also bet that we will be doing another one of the road trips where we put all of these systems to the test. I'm also definitely going to be testing the nuanced differences between the R1 Gen 2 and the R2, because they have nearly identical autonomy systems. And, they felt pretty close when I did the R2 test drive, but that feeling close is not good enough for me. I'm going to actually put it to the test. So thanks for joining. Hit subscribe so you don't miss these future tests. Until the next one. If you're interested in watching the most recent run of Rivian's Universal Hands-Free, you can check out the video up here. It honestly was a huge improvement. I can't wait to see what comes next. Just follow the detour here then. We've got this nice corolla that's just pulled right